Hi, good morning. Mrs. Dudley here with my good friend Jim Buchy. And some of you sent in some questions for an interview with Jim. I'm very excited that he was able to join us here at school. Today with Mr. Buchy is really special because, first of all, he came from very far away. So thank you very much for taking that time. And he's just been instrumental in, building our whole program. He's the reason why I'm even involved. So I'm going to let him introduce himself, and then we'll get to some of your questions.
Thanks, Mary. I'm a former 12-term state representative in the Ohio House of Representatives, and my home is Greenville up in Darke County, which is, if you were to take US 127 out of Cincinnati and drive 75 miles north, you'd be in Greenville. Greenville is the county seat of Darke County, and my House district, which was Darke County, Mercer County, Auglaize, and Shelby County, is accountable for about 15% of total food production in the state of Ohio.
Wow.
So it's a big ag district, and it coincidentally has 20 school districts in the House district. And those 20 school districts are very highly rated in the state. As a matter of fact, 10 of the 20 are in the top 50 academic schools of the 608 in Ohio.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yes. And they're rural schools. They're agriculture-based, obviously. And we have tremendous academic excellence and in family excellence. And a large part of that excellence comes back to 4-H and FFA, because all those schools have strong 4-H programs and FFA programs, and those contribute to the success of the quality of the schools. And so I became very interested in wanting to see about expanding agriculture education into the cities as well as all schools. Someday I'd like to see 4-H and FFA in every school building in Ohio. If we had that, we'd have a tremendously better state to live in. So and I grew up in the meat packing business. I'm actually a butcher by trade, and I have a sentimental attachment to Cincinnati because my great grandfather emigrated to this country from Alsace-Lorraine. Now that's that piece of real estate between France and Germany, and the meat business in my family goes back over 200 years into Alsace. So he emigrated to America in 1869, and he went from New York to Pittsburgh to Cincinnati, which was Porkopolis. Here's where the packing companies were. And he worked here in the packing houses. And then in 1875, he went to Greenville because he had a cousin that was there in business, and he went up and worked with him. And then in 1878, started a slaughterhouse of his own. And so it ended up being 5 generations, and we were in business 134 years. And so my daughter was running our company when we ultimately sold it to Cisco Foods here in Cincinnati.
Wow.
About 8 years ago. So my background is totally agricultural related, and because of the privilege that I had to serve in the Ohio House of Representatives, representing the largest agricultural district and one of the most successful districts as far as education is concerned, it was very exciting for me to be able to support and be involved in interjecting agriculture education, the expanse of it here in Cincinnati.
That's great. I mean, I can tell you're really passionate about it.
I am. I eat, sleep, and drink this because the work you're doing and the work that Cincinnati Public Schools are doing with this program, with your FFA program at Gamble, and with the 4-H program that started in Rothenburg, and I think has been expanded into a few other schools. Hopefully, someday we'll have 4-H in all 46 K through 6s and FFA in your 16 high schools.
My students are familiar with FFA.
Sure.
Charles Tassel told us a little bit about 4-H in his view, but it would just be nice to maybe take a step backwards and say, what is 4-H?
Well, 4-H was founded by A.B. Graham, who was from over near Urbana in Champaign County, and it basically, the 4-H stands for Heart, Head, Hand and Health. And it teaches basically farm to plate agriculture, and teaches the children who are in 4-H values to help them build a basis of understanding to become very successful in life, and through agriculture education. And there are so many projects. There are agriculture-related projects. Out in the rural areas, you've got livestock, you've got poultry, you've got hogs, you've got cattle, you've got dairy. Those clubs are involved in those kind of activities. You sew and you cook. 4-H is involved in starting to educate children the values of becoming successful in life through agriculture education. The key ingredient to making 4-H clubs successful are parents and adults who are really focused in on helping the children. The more parental involvement you get involved in the clubs, the better the club becomes. And what you're doing here, not only with your work at Gamble, but with the emphasis of this 4-H initiative that's coming, by developing the 19 lots through 4-H clubs, this is just really exciting.
It's exciting.
Oh,
I agree.
It's phenomenal.
Thank you so much for sending in your questions. We're going to ask him a little bit about his political career, his current work as an advisor, and then just some kind of fun tidbits about his list of awards, his long list of awards. And we will wrap it up by, asking him about how he feels that his work is leaving a legacy to go along with our cycle theme. You are a senior advisor for the Batchelder Group. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. The Batchelder Company is named after the former Speaker of the Ohio House of Representatives, the Honorable William G. Batchelder. And he was Speaker of the House for 4 years. And he and I have known each other since 1978. And he was one of my mentors when I was in the House of Representatives. As a matter of fact, he encouraged me to run originally back in 1982. So he and my other mentor was former State Representative Robert Netzley, who at one time was my state representative in Greenville. So those were the two people that I looked to for guidance when I was elected to the House. So Speaker Batchelder and I worked together for many years. He's the second longest serving state rep in history, of being there for 38 years. As a matter of fact, Representative Netzley was there 40 years, and he's the longest serving state representative in Ohio history.
Oh, wow.
And matter of fact, both of them and I served with William Mallory, former state representative William Mallory, who was majority leader of the Ohio House when I first went in 1983. So Bill Mallory and I became friends very early on in my career. And then, of course, I served with his son, Mark Mallory, who then was in the House and the Senate, and was mayor of Cincinnati and so on. And then I was privileged to serve in 2 different terms and 2 different times, because I was term limited out, and then came back. And when I came back in 2011, I run into Representative Dale Mallory. So I had the privilege of serving with William Mallory, Mark Mallory, and Dale Mallory. So that's the Mallory connection in Buchy in Cincinnati. Now, Batchelder Company is owned by a fellow named Troy Judy, who was Speaker Batchelder's chief of staff, and for the time he was Speaker. And then his partner is Chad Hawley, who was policy director and then chief of staff during that time frame. They started the company, and of course, because they got their start with Speaker Batchelder, they named the company after him. They're a complete public policy company. They do everything from lobby. They lobby for or against legislation and regulations and so on. And they do grassroots field work for associations, and they have clients, business clients, and an array of clients, and some of them agriculture clients. And that's where I kind of fit in at times because of my agriculture background. But they also are involved in fundraising, and they're involved in candidate recruitment, most everything based on state government.
Okay.
And so when I retired from the House in 2016, they came to me and wanted to know if I'd join them and help them, particularly with my background in being, first off, involved in government for about 40 years. I also was, at one time, assistant director of the Ohio Department of Agriculture, and my job was to run the administration of the department. And I did that for about 3.5 years. And I also worked for the National Federation of Independent Business, NFIB, which is a trade association for small family businesses, small and independent businesses. And so I worked with them for about 3 years. And then, of course, I was involved in my family business. So, but when I went to work for the Batchelder Company, they gave me the title of senior advisor, and I affectionately tell everybody that all that means is I'm the oldest guy in the room. So, but because I've been around so long, I know a lot of people, and I know basically how to navigate the system. I know a lot about being able to deal with people in various agencies and so on. So I'm not a lobbyist. I don't get involved in specifics. What I do in our company the Batchelder Company has probably 30 or 40 clients, and whenever their clients want to know what's coming down the road that's going to affect them, when they have meetings and so on, I'm usually in the room to basically offer a historical perspective because I've been there for 40 years, or also advice and counsel because of what I've experienced in my career and so on. So that's what I do. But I basically, in spending the bulk of my time expanding 4-H and FFA and ag education at Central State University and Ohio State, I'm just doing everything I can to expand agriculture education in schools.
Nice. Well, and it's interesting. So you started off in an agricultural family. You guys had a meat packing company. And so are there other members of your family that are political? The Mallory family seems to be,
Sure.
It's kind of a family. That's their family business,
Sure.
right? Is politics. So how did you make that switch?
Well, I stumbled into public service. Back in 1980, we had a situation on the Board of Education at Greenville, where my home, in which we had a sudden 2 resignations of the members of the board, and I was basically recruited to be appointed to fill one of those vacancies. Never had any. I was busy peddling baloney. I had no interest in running for public office or anything of the kind, but the school needed some help. I was recruited. My wife and our children supported me, and so I was appointed to the school board, and then I served in that capacity until there was reapportionment. Every 10 years there's reapportionment of the House and Senate district. And so in 1982, our Representative Netzley, who I mentioned a few minutes ago, was our state representative, and the reapportionment that moved him away from Greenville. He was no longer going to be our representative, and so they created a new district with no incumbent. And so I was basically encouraged by a lot of people to run for Ohio House of Representatives. And so sat down at the kitchen table with the family, and they said, "Hey, Dad, go for it." So I ran for state representative, and I was elected, and here we are in 2020, and I'm still involved in public service. I stumbled into public service.
Wow. Well, and you were encouraged by your community. Yeah,
I was.
That's
yes.
great.
As a matter of fact, I was 12 terms in the Ohio House of Representatives, and I had a winning vote average of 74%. So, yeah, people liked what I did. And the reason they did is because I represented the values of the people I worked for.
Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit more about working in the House of Representatives.
Mm-hmm. Number one function of the legislature is to write the laws that we live under in the state of Ohio. Well, representing the people I work for in the 84th House District in Western Ohio, because I was there representing their values in the Ohio House of Representatives. So that's the big thing. That's the second thing is to not only represent them when we're deliberating legislation and working for legislation that represents the majority feeling of the people I work for. It's also to help them when they have issues that need help. And so, every day somebody is dealing with something in an agency or a department in state government, and sometimes they run into some issues where they need some help. So I was involved in trying to help people navigate through and get things solved. So I did that, and then of course I worked hard to make sure that the legislation we passed in the House of Representatives and in the General Assembly reflected the values of my district.
Nice. Well, and so I know that our connection, I actually don't know that whole story.
In 2011, I had the opportunity to get to know a man named David Qualke. And David Qualke is the president of the Cleveland Teachers Union. And it all goes back to Senate Bill 5, which was a bill that we passed into law that had to do with giving local governments and schools the ability to manage better because they were going to get cut. I mean, this was the first year that Governor Kasich was in office, and we had an $8 billion shortfall. And the governor and the General Assembly did not want to raise taxes. We wanted to adjust the budget so that everything was taken care of so we could get our economy picked up. Mm-hmm. And he had 5 pieces of legislation to get there, and one of them was Senate Bill 5. From my perspective, the idea of Senate Bill 5 was to give local governments and schools the ability to manage with less money. Okay. Well, it was contested, and it went to the polls. People asked for a referendum, and it was defeated, so it did not become law. Okay. Well, while that campaign was going on to either rectify or eliminate Senate Bill 5, I met David Qualke, and he in Cleveland. And so we got to know each other very well, and he wanted to find out if there was a way that he could get some more help to make things better in Cleveland schools. And so, being from an agriculture area, I said, have you got FFA in any of your 30 high schools here? No. And do you have 4-H involved? No. So bottom line is, I said, would you maybe be part of a pilot? Well, why don't we see if the school district and the board would support putting FFA in a high school and putting 4-H in one of they have K through 8. And he supported that, and so the Cleveland Metro School District supported it, and so at the same time, because of my friendship and knowing the agriculture support that the Mallory family has for 4-H, I came to Dale because we were working together and said, hey, I want to put a pilot FFA and 4-H project in Cleveland, and how about if we picked a school and did the same thing in Cincinnati? Let's do a Cleveland-Cincinnati pilot project and see if we can't get some agriculture education to help schools. And at the same time, then State Representative Alicia Reese was involved, and she was very supportive of this as well. So bottom line is, I had a meeting with then superintendent of Cincinnati schools, was wonderful lady Mary Ronan, and she and Kelly Broscheed, who was in curriculum with the schools, and Eve Bolton, who is a current board member. She was on the school board then, and we had a meeting and to talk about it, see if there was interest in Cincinnati in putting a pilot in with FFA in high school and 4-H in a K through 8. So, and they were very, very receptive and objective to it. And so, bottom line is, I think it was fall of 2013, we started with the FFA program at Gamble, and Rothenberg Academy had the 4-H piece. Mm-hmm. So it's been here ever since. And at East Tech High School in Cleveland, they have FFA, and George Washington Carver, which is 6 blocks down the street from East Tech, they've got the 4-H piece. Okay. And so what's happening is, now we've had 5-6 complete years going on, and what we're learning is that the graduation rate in both East Tech and Gamble is starting to grow faster than the other schools. And I'd like to think that a large contributor to that happening is through agriculture education. And the reason and why I'm so excited about it is your kids are excited about learning because they see the results of their handiwork.
Yes.
They're excited about what they when you plant a flower, a seed, like your project you've got with the kids who picked up the bags with the soil and
Yes.
this project you're working on. When they see they plant, and they end up with, you plant a seed of corn and you end up with an ear of corn. And by the way, that's manufacturing.
Yeah.
So you're teaching kids at an early age production. We've added FFA at Huber Heights Wayne School in Dayton,
Okay.
Euclid in Cleveland, Linda McKinley in Columbus. This is their second year for it, and they're wanting to expand. Everybody want to expand.
It's great.
Oh, it's phenomenal.
It's great.
It's just phenomenal. What it's doing is helping kids become better prepared to be successful.
Yes. Leadership skills I see developed all the time.
No question about it.
One of our students looked at your impressive resume and your list of awards, and she was particularly curious about the Little Brown Jug Wall of Fame. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. Well, I'm also a very strong supporter and fan of harness horse racing. Now, you have thoroughbreds. You've got a thoroughbred track here in Cincinnati, but right north of Cincinnati at Monroe, there is Miami Valley Raceway at the Racino. They raced trotters and pacers. That's the horses that pull sulkies. And
what's a falky?
Sulky is a modified bike where you sit. The driver of the horse sits on a seat on a sulky that is hooked up to the horse.
Okay.
Thoroughbred. You have jockeys that ride thoroughbreds, and you have drivers that race the horses on a sulky. A trotter has the right front leg and the left rear leg goes together, and the left front and the right front, so they go this way. Pacers, the right hoof, right leg, and the right rear leg, front and rear, go at the same time, and the left same, so they go like this. Trotter, pacer.
Interesting.
All right. So
okay.
yeah, it is. And so, but horse racing in Ohio contributes over $1 billion to the economy, and it's agriculture, because you've got to have veterinarians, you got to have feed for the horses, you got to have all these ancillary supplies. It's agriculture. It's a big deal. Most people think, of course, it's horse racing. It's betting too, but it's a big contributor to the economy through agriculture.
Yeah.
So I've been a supporter and a fan of harness racing since I was a teenager, and I was very involved in legislation that made sure that we have harness racing in Ohio at all times at the racetracks and the racinos. 67 county fairs of the 88 county fairs that have harness racing conducted at their fair.
Okay.
So Ohio, and we have 4 harness racing tracks: Monroe, Dayton, Northfield Park, and Scioto Downs in Columbus. And so I have been one of the there's the top 2 races in the sport are the Hamiltonian race, which is conducted at the Meadowlands Racetrack across in New Jersey from New York City. That's a 3-year-old trotting race. And that's the premier trotting race in the sport. The premier pacing race in the sport is the Little Brown Jug, which is conducted during the Delaware Fair in Delaware, Ohio.
Okay.
And it's always the 3rd Thursday of September. And when the race for the Little Brown Jug goes off, there's 45 to 50,000 people in the stands.
Wow.
It's the biggest attended horse race in the country.
Wow.
And so I've been a big supporter of that, and because of my efforts in the legislature on guaranteeing racing in Ohio, I've been involved for a long time. And each year they have the Wall of Fame, which is like the Harness Racing Hall of Fame.
Okay.
And 3 years ago or 4 years ago, 5, I don't know, time goes by so fast, they elected me to the they call it the Wall of Fame, because everybody who's in the fame has their picture on the wall, little write up. So that's what the Wall of Fame is.
I love it. Well, thank you for sending that question in.
Yes.
I learned a lot just now.
Yes.
And,
Well, you'll have to come up sometime.
Oh,
It's a
well, of
fabulous
course.
race.
I've actually never been to a horse race.
Well, we'll take care of that.
So we are studying legacy for our cycle theme this year. And one of the students wanted to know, how is your work contributing to the community? And I think that that's something that people can kind of take out of our previous conversations of, just the positive things that you've contributed over the course of your career and into the future. But I would like to hear you personally kind of talk about your living legacy and the legacy that you are building right now.
We're talking about it right now because of my background, and because I know and how I was taught in my family, and how my great-grandfather, when he came here to be free, because he left Alsace-Lorraine because the French and the Germans were fighting over this property all the time, and he was tired of the war. So that's why he emigrated to America, is to get away from that. And there are many people in Cincinnati, Ohio, who have that same kind of heritage. There are a lot of Germans in Cincinnati who go back to Alsace-Lorraine, and the packing industry that was here, is full of us. So that legacy that was handed to me in my family from generation to generation is through agriculture, through the meat business. In my efforts, from what I was taught by my parents and my grandparents, and how I've lived my life, basically the legacy that I hope to have someday is having your kids become the most successful, and their kids becoming most successful, and they can look back and say, a large part of my success started at Gamble with Mary Dudley, learning the goodness of farm to plate and the values that come with ag education. There's nothing exotic about this. See, it's good stuff.
Yeah.
It's what works.
Yes.
And what works and what it does, it puts families together. It brings families together. It teaches generation to generation to generation what good things are. And it does it through exciting education that starts farm to plate. The legacy I would like to see is someday that there's 4-H and FFA in every school building.
Yes, yes.
And as agriculture education expands, your students are going to be keys in helping the younger students learn what you're teaching them, which is going to put a really coordinated program of developing the 19 lots, teaching the children how to raise food through horticulture and agriculture. And that'll help teach everybody in the community how to do that. And as we develop the lots through 4-H clubs, then as the Cincinnati public school system adds FFA to the high schools and 4-H to the K through 6s, you're going to have a totally coordinated program where everybody's excited about learning, and they're excited about learning through agriculture.
Yes, I totally agree. And I like your emphasis on the family.
Oh, yes.
Really in this time right now where we're sheltering in place, these family bonds are just whoosh. And this is a unit that the stronger that family unit can be, the better situations we have for our children, and the resilience of your community grows. So I love that agriculture can be a source of, positive engagement for families to do together.
No question about it. The success, don't forget, this country was founded in 1776 because of freedom, and we're free to succeed or fail on our own merits. And the tighter we have family bonds and working together as units, the more chance we've got to keep that freedom to be successful.
Thank you. Thank you for coming to visit us at Gamble today.
I can hardly. Every time I'm in, I was invited down here. Tell them I just didn't stumble in. Anytime I get a chance to come sit, look, I've been a Reds fan. I used to go to Crosley Field. See, back in the '50s. Yeah, I've been a Reds fan for my entire life, and so I have that plus my family bond here or ties here. Cincinnati is a very special community.
All right, guys. Well, if you have any other questions for Mr. Buchy, don't hesitate. Just reach out, send me an email, and we'll send them over.